A town didn't vanish all at once. It faded year by year under rain, forest, and time. Most people left. One woman stayed, for decades, long enough to make a hard place worth the effort. The place was Peak, Oregon, high on the slopes of Mary's Peak, where roads narrow, blur, and finally give up. To reach it today, you don't follow a map. You follow what remains. Roads that disappear in winter. Trails the forest reclaimed. A landscape that, for more than a century, has been erasing every fence, every path, every sign of life. And if you follow the story far enough, you find a woman who helped build this place in 1885. Her name was Virginia Kramer. She would later be known as Virginia Davidson. What follows are Virginia's memories, spoken decades later. These are her own words, shaped by the time she lived in and the world she survived. Not tales of legend, but long days, dust, and waiting. The life of a girl who had endured deserts, forests, and mountains, and the life of the woman who would help build Peak, Oregon. Here you'll find true stories from the Oregon Trail and early settlers, with details often missing from the historical record. If you find this worthwhile, please subscribe and like this video. Joining the channel helps support future work, and comments help guide what comes next. Virginia was born in Iowa in 1855. When she was 9, her family crossed the plains in a wagon train, leaving Iowa in 1864 and traveling west to Plumas County in Northern California. She remembered the journey vividly. They traveled with 4 wagons, 2 pulled by horses, 2 by 3 yoke of oxen. Besides her own family, her father brought 3 hired helpers to drive the teams and care for the stock. He had crossed the plains before. He knew the dangers. He believed survival required discipline, and he did not want anyone along who would not accept his leadership. Different people traveled with them for parts of the journey, but no one went the whole way. There was little sickness, though one helper suffered from mountain fever. Her grandmother was already ill when they started. A bed was fixed for her in one of the wagons. They expected to bury her on the plains. Instead, she recovered. She rose from her bed, lived several more years in California, and later returned to Iowa to die. Virginia remembered the journey not as legend, but as long days, dust, and waiting. Sometimes, she said, they could almost see the place where they had camped the night before. Adventure wasn't excitement. It was endurance. Decades later, Virginia recalled, the Indians would visit the camps to trade for beads and such things. She remembered one Indian pointing to her, offering a horse and blankets. The pile of trade goods grew. She was afraid her parents might accept it. Her father finally ordered the Indian to leave. That fear stayed with her. It became part of how she understood the world. Unpredictable, close, and demanding constant awareness. Virginia told another story. While the women washed clothes by a river, she and her sister were told to nap in the wagon. They woke to a noise. An Indian was reaching into the wagon. Virginia wiggled free. They screamed and climbed over the seat. When people came running, the Indian fled. Virginia ran straight to her mother. This is how she remembered it. Danger without warning, and the knowledge that safety could disappear in an instant. But it wasn't all fear. Day after day in dust and heat, the children invented games to pass the time. Once, Virginia blindfolded her sister and warned, "A big brown dog is coming." Then she said it stood on its hind legs. Her sister tore off the blindfold and screamed, "It's a bear." A man fired his gun in the air. The bear ran. 2 frightened girls ran too, but at least they'd had some excitement that day. Even on the hardest journeys, there was room for laughter. The wagon train didn't rush. They waited when grass was scarce, stopped for days when water was good. They crossed deserts at night, cut wild hay to carry with them. When livestock wandered off in the dark, they followed the sound of bells and found water. Virginia learned that survival wasn't luck. It was attention. Every small choice mattered. Every day required watching the land closely and responding before it punished you. In 1872, Virginia married Harrison Davidson. He was a teamster, owning his own outfit and taking work wherever he could find it, often freighting to Virginia City or the Eureka mines. In 1885, Virginia and Harrison came to Benton County in Oregon. They settled at the northwest foot of Mary's Peak on land drained by Bark Creek, which flows into Mary's River by way of Shot Pouch Creek. They would live here for more than 30 years. This land didn't frighten Virginia, wet, steep, and remote. She had crossed deserts, waited weeks for grass to grow, and endured heat, dust, and endless miles. Hardship had shaped her. A place like this felt familiar. Even today, reaching this slope means following roads that fade, close in winter, and don't always match the map, just as they did when Virginia first arrived, with nothing but knowledge, determination, and endurance to guide her. Long before Virginia, and others like her, arrived, the land already had a name and a story. For the Kalapuya people, Mary's Peak was sacred. They called it Chitimenwi, meaning the place of spiritual power, a name rooted not in ownership, but in relationship. When floodwaters covered the valley, they climbed this mountain for safety, returning again and again to hunt, to gather, to pray, and to heal. It was a place where survival and reverence met, where the boundary between worlds was felt rather than explained. Names are not just labels on a map. They carried memory, responsibility, and meaning. In the late 1800s, a small town took shape on the slopes of Mary's Peak. It was called Peak. Virginia and Harrison lived here for more than 30 years. There was some good farmland, but their livelihood came mostly from timber. Cedar was abundant, and from it they made shakes, hand-shaved shingles, and fence posts. Peak even had a small cedar shingle mill. Work was constant, and every day demanded strength, skill, and patience. This was not isolation. It was independence. They chose a place most people passed by, and they stayed. In 1905, Peak was large enough to build a one-room schoolhouse for its children. The schoolhouse once stood at the back edge of the graveyard. Today, it is only a flat patch of land. The log structure was chinked with moss and roofed and sided with hand-split cedar shakes. The community hired young, single teachers who boarded with local families, though few stayed beyond their first year. The school term lasted 3 months in the fall and 3 months in the spring. The school also doubled as a church for the United Brethren. A hymnal survives. Inside, someone wrote, "Hymn book for Mary's Peak School and Church. Peak, Oregon, 1900. That handwriting mattered. It meant someone wanted this place to feel complete. Families gathered here to learn, to sing, and to pray. Outside, the forest stretched wide and indifferent, while inside these small spaces there was warmth, order, and a sense of purpose." Around 1896, Virginia opened a post office in her home, a simple 1.5-story wood frame building finished in board and batten. In 1899, Peak became an official post office, just as the Postal Service began expanding rural delivery, testing whether remote places like this could remain connected to the rest of the country. Mail arrived by buckboard, traveling more than 20 miles over steep, unpaved roads. In winter, drivers cut fallen trees out of the way by hand. The mail came one day and went back the next. Mail was reassurance, proof that the world beyond the mountain still existed, and proof that Peak had not been forgotten. For more than 20 years, Virginia handled every letter, every postcard, and every package. She knew the names, she recognized the handwriting, and she knew who was waiting. Peak stayed connected because she kept it that way, not through distance but through care. In 1910, Virginia most likely hand-stamped this postcard with a 1-cent stamp and sent it from Peak, Oregon. It read, "Hello, Lottie. How is Springfield by this time, and do you like it better than the sunny South? I suppose you're going to school. How is the prof? I'm having a dandy time." The card was signed by a man named Walt. In 1911, another postcard was sent from Peak, Oregon. It read, "Dear Francis, just received your card. Glad you received your package, all right. Was over to your other big sisters today. They are fine, except for bad colds." The card was signed by a woman named Irene. It's the ordinariness of these messages that gives them weight. Peak was not remarkable to the people who lived there. It was simply home, and every small moment mattered. These hand-stamped cards are physical reminders of Virginia and the care she carried into her work. Nothing remains of the post office now. All that is left is the skeleton of an animal beside the road, about the size of a small dog. Its species unknown. And at the site of the former post office, there is only a discarded, rusted metal can. What once carried voices, news, and connection has faded into silence, leaving behind only the quiet trace of a life that once insisted on being here. But time moved on. Beyond the stillness of the trees, the outside world was changing fast. For years, it was believed the new highway to Newport would follow the road to Peak, dry and elevated, already lined with farms, homesteads, and the growing town of Peak. Families bought land along its path, certain that prosperity would come. But engineers found a way through the wet valley below. Highway 20 was built there instead, slipping past Peak, leaving the town behind, quiet and forgotten. Cut off from trade and travel, the town began to thin and then slowly fade. The old roads softened into ruts, work moved elsewhere, and the post office closed in 1917. Virginia and Harrison stayed as long as they could, watching the forest press inward over fields they had cleared and fences they had built by hand. Eventually, they moved to Philomath, Oregon, to be closer to their daughter, Violet. When people left, the land did not wait. It moved quietly to close the gap, erasing the edges of what had once been. On Mary's Peak, more than 100 inches of rainfall each year, enough to soften edges and blur footprints, and enough for the forest to return quietly, long after people were gone. Leaving was not failure, but a quiet acknowledgement of time moving on. Even as Peak grew quieter and began to fade, there were moments when people imagined it might return. In the 1920s, the area was briefly considered for revival as a ski town, with lifts proposed for the slopes of Mary's Peak, but the idea never took hold. What followed was not collapse, but gradual absence. Peak slowly slipped from memory as those who had built the town quietly passed away. Harrison Davidson passed away in Philomath in 1925 at the age of 89. He was buried at Peak. Virginia later wrote, "I am living here with Violet and taking a rest. The world is not so bad, and will be all right when we old folks get our pension." Virginia Davidson passed away in 1942 at the age of 87. She was buried at Peak on a quiet, forested slope. From a wagon train crossing the plains, to raising a family beneath Mary's Peak, to keeping the mail moving through snow and mud, her life followed the land itself. A life fully lived and then returned to it. Today, the small cemetery is cared for by Harrison and Virginia Davidson's great-grandson. He made most of the white wooden grave markers. There are only 13 known burials, and each one is marked. The fence marks the ground, but the mountain holds him still, quietly, patiently, remembering. And for those who come looking now, this is where the story no longer moves forward, but settles, waiting to be noticed. Here, the story does not announce itself, but waits quietly along the road. Today, the old logging road that once led to the heart of Peak is part of the Corvallis to the Coast Trail, a 60-mile path winding through the Coast Range and linking the valley to the ocean. Once imagined as a highway, it has become something gentler, a trail for hikers, not travelers in a hurry. The land alongside the road is now managed for timber, where trees are planted, thinned, and harvested in long cycles measured not in years, but in decades. The forest you walk through is working land, shaped by careful planning and quiet labor, much like it was a century ago. If you pause here, among the moss, cedar, and fir, you might still hear it, the faint echo of a vanished town and the lives that once made this place home. The forest offers no explanations, and all you can do is follow fragments, photographs, old maps, and memories recorded nearly a century ago. Each piece hints at a place that once was, and gradually the land begins to shift around you. Peak does not appear before your eyes, but you feel it, and in that feeling, you recognize it. History does not survive in monuments. It survives in places like this, where ordinary people endured, adapted, and chose to stay for as long as they could. Peak was shaped by someone who endured, and in the whisper of the trees, her presence still lingers, quiet and undeniable, like the echo of a life fully lived, now returned to the land that held it.